Deep in the crystalline halls of the Galactic Council chamber, tension crackled like electricity through the vast space filled with representatives from countless worlds. Ambassador David Cross felt the weight of every gaze upon him as he prepared to deliver humanity's final ultimatum to the assembled alien dignitaries. The 12 human delegates sat rigid in their simple chairs, surrounded by the elaborate thrones and floating platforms of species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. The insectoid collective's chittering filled the air as High Counselor Brex raised his mantis-like head in obvious disdain. His compound eyes reflected the chamber's blue glow as he activated his translation device to address the human contingent with barely concealed contempt. "The young species speaks of demands again." Brex's mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. "What gives humans the right to challenge traditions that have maintained galactic peace for 10,000 years?" David stood slowly, his weathered, diplomat's face showing none of the fury burning inside his chest. Behind him, his colleagues from Earth's various nations maintained their composure, despite months of increasing frustration with the Council's dismissive attitude toward human contributions to galactic civilization. "High Counselor, we ask not for special treatment but for equal representation based on our contributions to this alliance." David's voice carried clearly across the vast space. Human innovation has revolutionized galactic medicine, enhanced faster-than-light communications, and provided defensive technologies that have protected 17 worlds from the Dark Fleet's attacks. A wave of dismissive sounds arose from various sections of the chamber. The aquatic tidewalkers gurgled their disapproval, while the energy-based luminari flickered in synchronized patterns that clearly conveyed their skepticism about human claims. Dr. Helen Foster, Earth's chief scientific representative, rose to stand beside David. Her quiet authority commanded attention even from species that towered over her human frame. "Every breakthrough we achieve gets credited to others," she said calmly. "Every emergency we respond to becomes someone else's victory. Every proposal we submit gets voted down before proper discussion can even begin." The massive, reptilian hegemon representative named Torax uncoiled from his heated platform, his scales gleaming under the chamber's illumination. When he spoke, his voice rumbled with the authority of a species that had dominated space travel for millions of years. "Young species always believe their brief moments of cleverness constitute true wisdom." Torax's words dripped with condescension. "Your entire civilization has existed for mere moments in galactic time. What could you possibly understand about governing on such a vast scale?" Captain Miller, Earth's military liaison, felt his jaw clench at the familiar dismissal. His hands remained steady on the table before him, but everyone could see the tension in his military bearing as he struggled to maintain diplomatic protocol. "Perhaps our youth is exactly what this council needs," Dr. Foster replied with scientific precision. "Fresh perspectives on problems that your ancient wisdom has failed to solve for centuries." The ethereal communion's representative counselor, Lyra, drifted forward in her translucent form that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. When she spoke, her words bypassed the ears entirely and resonated directly in the minds of everyone present. "The humans speak of fresh perspectives, yet they bring only discord to our carefully maintained harmony. For 10 millennia, the Council has preserved peace through patience and collective wisdom. Would you destroy this stability for the sake of change?" David felt the telepathic pressure of her words attempting to influence his emotions and cloud his judgment. The subtle mental manipulation was a technique the ethereals had perfected over eons, making them formidable negotiators and dangerous enemies. But humanity had learned to recognize such intrusions and developed mental disciplines that provided some protection. "Your harmony is built on stagnation," David replied, his voice gaining strength as he spoke the words that would change galactic history forever. "You maintain peace by ensuring nothing ever changes, that no new voices challenge your comfortable assumptions. That isn't wisdom. It's fear disguised as tradition." The chamber erupted in outraged sounds from dozens of different species, clicking, roaring, buzzing, and frequencies beyond human perception created a cacophony of indignation that shook the crystalline walls. David had crossed a line that no junior species had ever dared approach in 10,000 years of council rule. High Counselor Breck spread his wings in a display of dominance as he rose to his full imposing height. You dare accuse the Council of fear. You forget your place in this chamber, human. You exist here by our grace, not by any inherent right. Grace? Captain Miller finally spoke, his military training evident in every carefully controlled word. You call it grace when you block our trade routes until we accept unfavorable terms? Grace when you deny our colonies defensive platforms while pirates raid our shipping lanes? Grace when you classify our most effective technologies as potentially destabilizing and ban their use throughout the galaxy? The aquatic representative depth singer Coral activated her translation device with aggressive fin movements. Human military technology is inherently violent and destructive. Your weapons are designed not just to defeat enemies but to completely annihilate them. This is not the way of civilized beings who value life and peaceful coexistence. Dr. Foster's laugh carried a bitter edge that surprised even her human colleagues. Civilized beings. Your species practices ritual consumption of defeated political rivals. The reptilian hegemony maintains slave worlds under the pretense of protection. The insectoid collective devours entire ecosystems to feed their hive minds. But somehow our defensive technologies are the real problem here? Those are cultural practices evolved over millions of years of development. Torax defended with growing irritation. They serve purposes that your young minds cannot possibly comprehend. Your violence serves only destruction and chaos. Our violence serves survival. Captain Miller shot back with military directness. Which is exactly why you fear it so much. You've grown soft in your ancient civilizations, dependent on others to fight your battles, while you debate endlessly about the philosophy of conflict. When the Dark Fleet comes calling, you beg for human fleets to defend your precious worlds. The Luminary representative pulsed with indignant energy patterns. The Dark Fleet threatens all civilized species equally. It is natural that all should contribute to defense according to their unique abilities and resources. Then why aren't we represented equally in decisions about how that defense is conducted? David demanded, his diplomat's training finally giving way to raw frustration. Why do we provide 30% of the Council's military forces but control less than 5% of strategic decisions that affect our people's lives? Silence fell over the chamber like a suffocating blanket, as the mathematical reality of the situation became undeniably clear. The humans had struck at the heart of the Council's fundamental hypocrisy. They were expected to bear the heaviest burdens of galactic civilization while being denied its most basic privileges. High Counselor Brex's mandibles clicked in visible agitation as he struggled to formulate a response that wouldn't reveal the Council's deliberate exploitation of human capabilities. Military contribution does not automatically grant political wisdom or cultural maturity, he finally managed. The ability to wage effective war does not qualify a species to make lasting peace between diverse civilizations. But the complete inability to understand modern warfare apparently qualifies you to make life and death decisions about it. Dr. Foster's scientific precision cut through the political rhetoric like a laser. Your tactical decisions in the Outer Rim conflicts cost millions of innocent lives that could have been saved with proper human strategic input. Your stubborn refusal to adapt to new threats has left 7 worlds defenseless against Dark Fleet infiltration tactics that we identified and reported months ago. Counselor Lyra's ethereal form brightened with dangerous telepathic energy as she prepared to respond. The humans speak passionately of lives lost, yet their proposed military solutions would have resulted in far greater casualties and regional instability. They see only immediate tactical advantages, never long-term strategic consequences or diplomatic ramifications. Long-term consequences like the complete collapse of the Outer Rim's defensive network? Captain Miller's voice carried the weight of someone who had personally witnessed the cost of political incompetence. Like the fall of Haven Station? Because you refused to authorize human shield modifications that could have saved 10,000 civilians? The chamber's atmosphere grew heavy with tension that seemed to press down on every being present. David could sense they were approaching a critical moment, the point where decades of accumulated frustration and diplomatic failures would either find resolution or explode into something far more dangerous for everyone involved. This council has made its position perfectly clear through years of consistent actions, David said slowly, his words measured and final like a judge delivering a verdict. Humanity is expected to serve but never to lead, to sacrifice but never to decide, to innovate but never to receive credit or recognition. We are to remain junior partners in perpetuity, regardless of our contributions, capabilities, or the value we bring to galactic civilization. The natural order of galactic development requires patience and gradual integration. High Counselor Brex replied with the authority of ancient tradition. In time, perhaps in a few more centuries of proven stability, your species may mature enough for greater responsibilities and expanded roles in council governance. Dr. Foster stepped forward one final time, her voice carrying across the chamber, with crystal clarity that would echo through galactic history. We have waited patiently for recognition that will never come honestly. We have played by rules specifically designed to keep us subordinate and dependent. We have accepted disrespect in the name of diplomacy and allowed our people to die while you debate the politics of their protection. She turned to face the assembled representatives of humanity, her words carrying the weight of a species finally reaching its breaking point after decades of systematic marginalization. The question before us is elegantly simple. Do we continue to beg for respect from those who will never grant it willingly, or do we take our rightful destiny into our own capable hands? The vote was swift, unanimous, and irreversible. 12 hands rose in perfect synchronization. 12 voices spoke as one with absolute conviction. We formally withdraw from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The chamber erupted in buzz and chaos as ancient species tried to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Never in 10,000 years of recorded galactic history had a member species voluntarily withdrawn from the Council's protective embrace. The very concept was alien to civilizations built on collective decision-making and gradual consensus. High Counselor Brex's voice cut through the noise like a blade of pure authority. You cannot simply abandon your responsibilities. Your species is bound by countless treaties, trade agreements, and defensive pacts. You cannot exist in dangerous isolation. David smiled for the first time since entering the chamber, and his expression carried the confidence of a species finally free to pursue its own path. Watch us. As the 12 human delegates filed out of the chamber with measured dignity, their footsteps echoing in the stunned silence that followed their historic declaration, none of them looked back at the civilization they were leaving behind. They had crossed a threshold from which there could be no return, and the galaxy would never be the same. Behind them, the Council dissolved into frantic debate and desperate attempts at damage control, but their words fell on empty air. Humanity was done listening to those who had never learned to hear. News of humanity's withdrawal spread across the galaxy faster than light itself, carried by quantum communication networks that connected every inhabited world in a web of instantaneous information exchange. Within hours, the impossible had become reality, and the established order that had governed galactic civilization for 10 millennia was facing its first existential crisis. Admiral Rebecca Stone reviewed incoming reports from across human space, aboard the flagship UES Defiance, watching as humanity's 73 colony worlds responded to Earth's historic decision with overwhelming support. Civilian vessels were being rapidly retrofitted with defensive systems, military reserves were activating across all sectors, and research facilities were working around the clock to prepare for whatever retaliation the Council might attempt. Admiral, we're receiving diplomatic communications from 47 different species. Communication Officer Peters reported, his voice tight with barely controlled urgency. Most are demanding immediate reconsideration of our withdrawal decision. Any direct threats among them? Admiral Stone asked, her weathered features betraying none of the deep concern she felt for the millions of humans now cut off from traditional galactic protection networks. 18 species have issued formal warnings about severe consequences of our actions. The reptilian hegemony is mobilizing their border fleets for possible intervention. The Insectoid Collective has completely closed all established trade routes through their territory. The ethereal communion is attempting to establish unauthorized telepathic contact with human leadership, claiming they want to negotiate a peaceful resolution. Admiral Stone's expression hardened at the mention of ethereal, telepathic contact. Their mental abilities made them extraordinarily dangerous negotiators, capable of influencing thoughts and emotions in subtle ways that their targets rarely recognized until it was far too late. Inform all commands immediately. No unauthorized, telepathic contact is permitted under any circumstances. Any ethereal presence detected in human space is to be considered a potential security threat requiring immediate investigation. Meanwhile, on the agricultural world of Riverside, one of humanity's most prosperous colony planets, Governor Martin Walsh watched with growing satisfaction as Galactic Council representatives packed their sophisticated equipment with barely concealed panic. The orbital monitoring stations they had claimed were for mutual security were being hastily dismantled, finally revealing their true purpose as comprehensive surveillance posts. Governor, the Council representatives are demanding immediate transportation. Off-world, his aide whispered urgently. They claim diplomatic immunity protects them from any form of retaliation or detention. Walsh studied the alien beings scrambling to load their transports with equipment they had claimed was simple administrative technology. Grant their request for immediate transport but thoroughly inspect everything they attempt to remove from the planet. I strongly suspect we'll discover their diplomatic mission was actually gathering detailed intelligence on our defensive capabilities. The inspection revealed exactly what Walsh had suspected. Comprehensive scans of human military installations, detailed analyses of agricultural production capabilities, complete psychological profiles of human leadership figures, and sophisticated communication equipment designed for covert intelligence gathering. The Council hadn't simply been governing humanity. They had been systematically preparing for the possibility of controlling them completely if cooperation ever failed. In the advanced research facilities of New Geneva, Dr. Amanda Ross was making discoveries that would fundamentally reshape humanity's understanding of their place in the larger galactic community. The sophisticated technologies that the Council had repeatedly claimed were too dangerous for human use were finally revealing their closely guarded secrets under intense scientific investigation. The quantum resonance patterns are completely artificial in nature, she explained to her assembled team of physicists and engineers. The Council didn't develop these technologies through natural scientific evolution. They were provided with them by external entities. Someone else built deliberate restrictions into the very foundations of galactic civilization. Her colleague, Dr. Paul Kim, looked up from his detailed analysis of captured Council communication equipment with obvious excitement. That would perfectly explain why our innovations consistently bypass their established technological pathways and development models. We're not following their predetermined blueprint for species advancement. The implications were absolutely staggering for everyone involved. If the Council's vaunted technology was artificially provided rather than naturally developed through scientific progress, then their proud claims to superior wisdom and evolutionary advancement were fundamentally false. They were no more naturally advanced than humanity. They were simply following someone else's detailed instruction manual. The most disturbing discovery came when they analyzed the quantum signatures embedded deep within the Council's most secure communication protocols. The encryption patterns matched theoretical models that human scientists had developed for hypothetical contact with entities existing in parallel dimensional frameworks. We need to report this discovery immediately to the highest levels, Dr. Ross said, her voice barely above a whisper as the full implications became clear. The Galactic Council isn't what they claim to be at all. They're not even originally from this dimensional framework. As humanity began systematically uncovering the truth about their former overseers, the galaxy itself was beginning to fracture along lines that hadn't been visible for thousands of years. The sudden withdrawal of human military forces from established Council defense networks had created dangerous gaps that hostile forces were quick to exploit with devastating effectiveness. On the remote mining world of Kepler's Edge, reptilian hegemony forces found themselves completely overwhelmed without the human tactical support they had grown dependent upon. The defensive strategies they had consistently dismissed as crude and unsophisticated suddenly seemed brilliantly effective. in hindsight, as their traditional methods proved utterly inadequate against the Dark Fleet's adaptive combat tactics. Commander Ryax, desperately trying to coordinate the defense of the system's primary mining facility, attempted to implement human-style rapid response protocols without proper training or understanding. His forces, trained for centuries in the slow, methodical warfare preferred by the Council's ancient traditions, couldn't adapt quickly enough to the fluid tactics that humans had perfected through necessity. "Status report on all defensive sectors," he demanded as another devastating wave of Dark Fleet raiders broke through their carefully prepared perimeter defenses. "Sector 7 has completely fallen to enemy forces," his tactical officer reported, her reptilian features twisted with genuine fear. "The raiders are using advanced human-designed jamming techniques against our communication networks. Our scattered forces can't coordinate effective responses anymore." The bitter irony was unmistakable. The Dark Fleet was successfully using human innovations against Council forces. Innovations that the Council had stubbornly refused to adopt because they originated from a supposedly primitive species. Ryax realized with growing horror that humanity's withdrawal might herald the complete collapse of the entire galactic defense network. Similar catastrophic scenes were playing out across dozens of star systems as the true extent of humanity's critical contribution to galactic stability became painfully apparent. The young species that had been consistently dismissed as militaristic and crude had actually been the essential backbone of the Council's ability to maintain peace and order. In the vast hive worlds of the insectoid collective, Queen Mind Nexus processed incoming reports of cascading system failures across their territory, with increasing alarm and confusion. The human-designed logistics protocols that had seemed unnecessarily complex and redundant were proving absolutely essential for maintaining supply lines across vast interstellar distances. The human methods were integrated far too deeply into our fundamental systems, her primary coordinator reported through the complex hive mind network that connected billions of individual consciousness. Their sudden withdrawal has created cascading failures in resource distribution, defensive coordination, and technological maintenance across all sectors. The Queen Mind's response rippled through billions of drone workers as she reached a conclusion that challenged everything the collective believed about species hierarchy and natural order. The humans were never truly junior partners in galactic civilization. They were essential partners whose contributions we deliberately minimized. Without their innovations and support, our systems are systematically collapsing. Perhaps the most significant reaction came from the youngest member species of the Council, civilizations that had joined the galactic community in the centuries following humanity's first contact. Unlike the ancient species that formed the Council's rigid core leadership, these newer members had worked directly with humans and fully understood their remarkable capabilities. On the oceanic world of Deep Current, the Aquatic Confederation's High-Depth Council convened an emergency session with unprecedented urgency. Unlike their official representative, Depth Singer Coral, who had publicly supported the Council's dismissive attitude toward humanity, the local leadership had experienced firsthand the tremendous benefits of human innovation and genuine cooperation. The humans consistently protected our vital trade routes from pirate attacks, Navigation Singer Tide declared, his bioluminescent patterns flashing with obvious distress. Their dedicated escort fleets prevented 17 major piracy incidents in our territory alone this year. Without their protection, our merchant vessels are completely helpless against organized raiders. More important than mere protection, Science Singer Current added with growing excitement, their research partnerships helped us develop revolutionary new techniques for deep ocean mining that doubled our resource extraction efficiency while reducing environmental impact. Their scientists worked alongside ours as true equals, sharing knowledge freely without demanding tribute or subordination. The lengthy debate continued for many hours, but the eventual conclusion was absolutely inevitable. The newer council members had benefited enormously from human partnership and genuine cooperation, and they were completely unwilling to simply accept humanity's departure without making serious attempts at reconciliation. Similar urgent discussions were occurring simultaneously on dozens of worlds as the true cost of humanity's withdrawal became increasingly apparent to everyone involved. The galaxy's established political landscape was shifting in ways that hadn't occurred for thousands of years, and ancient certainties that had seemed permanent were crumbling under the weight of new realities. As comprehensive reports continued flowing in from across human space, a clear pattern began emerging that surprised even humanity's most optimistic leaders. The Galactic Council's vaunted authority had been built on a foundation of human cooperation and innovation, carefully disguised by layers of bureaucracy and ancient tradition. Without that essential foundation, the entire governmental structure was beginning to collapse under its own weight. Admiral Stone studied the strategic reports with growing understanding of their true situation. They didn't just underestimate our capabilities and contributions, she told her senior staff with obvious satisfaction. They built their entire system of galactic government on the fundamental assumption that we would always be there to make it work effectively. They took our innovations and systematically repackaged them as their own ancient wisdom. The galaxy was about to learn through harsh experience that dismissing humanity as a junior partner, destined for permanent subordination, had been the greatest strategic mistake in the Council's 10,000-year history. The lessons would be written in the chaos and instability that was only just beginning to unfold across countless star systems. Ancient powers were discovering that their authority rested on foundations far more fragile than they had ever imagined, and the future of galactic civilization itself hung in the balance as unprecedented changes swept across the known universe. 3. Months after humanity's historic withdrawal, the galaxy had fractured into competing power blocks, each desperately struggling to maintain stability in a rapidly changing political landscape that no one fully understood. Emergency sessions of the Galactic Council had devolved into chaotic shouting matches between species as ancient alliances crumbled and dangerous new tensions emerged from unexpected directions. High Counselor Brex stood before the severely diminished assembly, his mandibles clicking with barely controlled fury as he read aloud the latest catastrophic reports from across Council territory. 17 star systems have declared complete independence from Council authority. 43 major trade routes have been permanently closed due to insurmountable security concerns. The Dark Fleet has successfully captured 12 outer colonies that were previously under our direct protection. The massive chamber that had once proudly housed representatives from over 300 diverse species now barely contained half that number. Empty seats served as stark reminders of how quickly galactic unity could dissolve when its fundamental assumptions proved dangerously false. The humans must be forced to return to the Council immediately, declared Torax with characteristic reptilian aggression, his massive form radiating barely contained violence. Their selfish withdrawal has destabilized everything we have carefully built over millennia. We cannot allow a single stubborn species to hold the entire galaxy hostage to their primitive emotional reactions. Counselor Lyra's ethereal form shimmered, with visible agitation, her telepathic presence broadcasting waves of anxiety that affected everyone within the chamber. Direct force will only validate their accusations about our governing methods. We must find more sophisticated ways to demonstrate that cooperation serves their interests far better than dangerous isolation. Even as the Council debated increasingly desperate responses to humanity's withdrawal, some of their own member species were quietly establishing unauthorized contact with human colonies. The newer members of the Council, those civilizations that had joined in recent centuries, were beginning to question whether their loyalty should lie with ancient traditions or practical necessities for survival. On the crystalline world of harmonies, Edge, the melodic collective's governing symphony, was conducting the most discord-filled session in their entire species' recorded history. Their official representative had voted to support the Council's dismissal of human concerns, but their local government had experienced the remarkable benefits of human cooperation firsthand. The humans helped us develop revolutionary new resonance technologies that increased our crystal growth rates by over 300%. Harmonized song leader Azure, her crystalline form vibrating with musical patterns of deep concern. Their brilliant scientists worked completely within our cultural frameworks, respecting our harmonic requirements while introducing innovations we had never even considered possible. But they remain violent and unpredictable by nature, countered Harmony Keeper Prism, faithfully echoing the Council's official position. Their military technologies are fundamentally designed for destruction and conquest, not the careful preservation of civilized order that we value above all else. The debate continued in complex musical patterns that would have sounded beautiful to human ears but carried profound political significance for the melodic collective. They were discovering that their choice wasn't simply between peace and violence, but between honest cooperation with innovative partners and comfortable stagnation under traditional authority. In human space, Admiral Stone was dealing with unprecedented challenges that tested every aspect of humanity's ability to survive. Independently, the comprehensive economic blockade imposed by several major council species was severely straining supply lines, while the sudden withdrawal of alien technical expertise had created dangerous gaps in some of humanity's more advanced technological systems. Report from the outer colonies indicates serious problems, Communication Officer Peters announced with obvious concern. 3 entire star systems are reporting critical shortages of rare minerals that we previously obtained exclusively through established council trade networks. Our total industrial capacity is down 18% across all sectors. What about the alternative supply sources that Dr. Ross's team identified? Admiral Stone asked with growing urgency. Promising preliminary results, but most require advanced technologies that the Council has consistently classified as restricted for security reasons. We're essentially having to reinvent entire industrial processes completely from scratch using only our own resources. The bitter irony wasn't lost on Admiral Stone or her staff. Humanity had been systematically forced to depend on Council resources, not because they naturally lacked the ability to develop viable alternatives, but because they had been deliberately prevented from doing so through carefully crafted restrictions. The protective embrace offered by galactic civilization had actually been a sophisticated form of technological colonialism designed to maintain permanent dependency. But humanity's response to enforced isolation was revealing capabilities that had been systematically suppressed by decades of Council oversight and control. Research facilities that had been strictly limited to approved projects suddenly exploded, with innovative breakthroughs. Military designers who had been forced to work within Council-approved parameters began developing technologies that seemed almost miraculous in their effectiveness and efficiency. Dr. Amanda Ross had moved her entire research team to a highly classified facility where they could work without fear of alien surveillance or interference. The discoveries they were making challenged everything that established galactic science believed it knew about physics, engineering, and the fundamental nature of reality itself. The dimensional barriers that limit technological development aren't natural phenomena, she explained to Admiral Stone during a secured briefing session. Someone artificially constructed them to limit and control technological development along very specific predetermined paths. The Council species have been unconsciously following a carefully designed technological evolution created by entities from completely different dimensional frameworks. Are you saying the Council is being directly controlled by these outside forces? Admiral Stone asked with obvious concern. Not controlled in any obvious way, but definitely guided and influenced, Dr. Ross replied carefully. Their technology and social structures have been subtly shaped by influences they don't recognize or understand. It perfectly explains why our innovations seem so disruptive to their established order. We're not following their predetermined script for species development. The implications were absolutely staggering for everyone involved. If humanity's analysis proved correct, then the entire structure of galactic civilization was fundamentally artificial, created by mysterious entities with their own unknown agenda for limiting the natural development of local species. While humanity struggled with the technical challenges of complete independence, the political landscape of the galaxy was shifting in ways that no one had anticipated or prepared for. The younger Council species were quietly establishing diplomatic contact with human colonies, desperately seeking to maintain beneficial relationships despite official Council policy forbidding such interactions. Ambassador Susan Martinez, formerly humanities representative to the Frontier Development Council, found herself overwhelmed with requests for private meetings from species representatives who officially supported humanity's isolation, but privately recognized their desperate need for continued cooperation. The Aquatic Confederation wants to maintain all joint research programs, she reported to Earth's leadership during an encrypted communication session. The Melodic Collective is offering exclusive trade agreements that bypass Council restrictions entirely. Even some of the Insectoid Collective's individual hive minds are sending carefully encrypted communications about continuing technological exchanges. The offers were certainly tempting, but they came with enormous risks for everyone involved. Any species caught cooperating with humanity would face severe retaliation from the Council's core members, potentially leading to their own forced isolation from galactic civilization. "What's your professional assessment of their sincerity?" asked President Chen, Earth's newly elected leader who had campaigned on a platform of maintaining humanity's hard-won independence while remaining open to genuine cooperation with honest partners. "They're caught between practical necessity and political survival," Ambassador Martinez replied with diplomatic precision. "They know they desperately need our innovations and cooperation, but they also know that supporting us openly could result in their own expulsion from the Council's protective structure." The situation was creating unprecedented cracks in the galactic political structure that had seemed absolutely solid for countless millennia. Species that had accepted Council leadership without question for thousands of years were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions about the true price of membership and the actual benefits of blind conformity. But the most significant development came from a completely unexpected source that would change everything. Deep in the ancient archives of the Ethereal Communion, a group of young telepaths was systematically uncovering historical records that had been classified at the highest levels for thousands of years. Mindsinger Nova, barely adult by ethereal standards but possessing telepathic abilities that surpassed many of her ancient elders, had discovered disturbing references to mysterious entities called the Architects, beings from outside normal, dimensional space who had made first contact with the earliest galactic civilizations and provided them with advanced technologies in exchange for strict adherence to specific developmental guidelines. "The original agreements were made so long ago that they've become fundamental parts of our basic cultural assumptions," she explained to her secret gathering of like-minded telepaths who shared her concerns about their civilization's true nature. "We think the Council's governmental structure is completely natural because our distant ancestors agreed to follow the Architect's detailed template for acceptable galactic civilization. But the humans never made such binding agreements with these Architects," observed Thoughtweaver Crystal, her complex mental patterns showing excitement and fear in equal measure. "They developed completely independently, which perfectly explains why their innovations don't fit within our established technological frameworks and social expectations." The young ethereals faced a choice that could fundamentally reshape their species' entire future. They could reveal their shocking discoveries and challenge the very foundations of galactic civilization, or they could remain silent and preserve the comfortable certainties that had defined their existence for countless generations. Their decision was made for them when Council security forces detected their unauthorized research into classified historical archives. The crackdown was swift and merciless, with the young telepaths facing permanent exile or complete mental reconditioning for their dangerous investigations into forbidden knowledge. But Nova managed to escape the security sweep, taking with her complete records of the Architect's extensive influence on galactic development. Her destination was absolutely clear. She would seek asylum with the only species that had proven capable of standing against the established order and surviving the consequences. As her small ship crossed into human space, carrying secrets that could completely redefine galactic civilization, the universe was about to discover that humanity's withdrawal from the Council was only the beginning of changes that would shake the very foundations of reality itself. The ancient structures that had maintained stability for 10,000 years were crumbling under the weight of revealed truth, and what emerged from the chaos would determine the ultimate future of every sentient species in the galaxy and beyond. The asylum seeker's ship materialized on human sensors at exactly 0347 hours, its unique energy signature completely unlike anything in the extensive human fleet database. Admiral Stone immediately authorized an intercept mission, but the mysterious vessel's occupant transmitted emergency codes that made her completely reassess the dangerous situation. "It's definitely an ethereal diplomatic frequency," reported Lieutenant Commander Hayes, humanity's leading expert on alien communication protocols. But the message patterns are completely wrong for normal contact. Instead of the usual hierarchical formalities, it's using emergency refugee protocols that we helped develop for displaced populations during the frontier conflicts. Admiral Stone studied the tactical display showing the small ethereal vessel surrounded by human patrol ships. In a defensive formation, first direct contact with any council species since the withdrawal was inevitably going to be politically significant. But something about this particular situation felt fundamentally different and far more important. "Patch me through to their communication system immediately," she ordered with military precision. The voice that came through the sophisticated translation equipment was young, frightened, but absolutely determined. "This is Mind Singer Nova of the Ethereal Communion, requesting immediate asylum under the Universal Rights Protocols that humanity championed during the early days of Council membership. I carry information that your species desperately needs to survive what is coming." Admiral Stone felt a chill run down her spine at the ominous implications. The Universal Rights Protocols had been one of humanity's first major contributions to galactic law, establishing comprehensive protection for individuals fleeing persecution regardless of species affiliation. The Council had adopted them reluctantly, and had rarely been forced to invoke them in actual practice. "Permission to come aboard granted immediately," Admiral Stone replied carefully, "but understand that your safety cannot be guaranteed if the Council formally demands your return through official channels." Nova's response carried a bitter telepathic resonance that the translation system struggled to properly convey. "The Council has already declared me officially dead to prevent the spread of dangerous ideas. I have absolutely nothing left to lose." The briefing that followed in the Defiance's most secure conference room would later be recognized as the pivotal moment when humanity's understanding of their situation shifted from political crisis to existential threat that could destroy all galactic civilization. Nova's revelations about the mysterious architects and their extensive manipulation of galactic development were disturbing enough, but her information about the Council's planned response to human independence was absolutely terrifying. "They call it the Correction Protocol," Nova explained, her ethereal form flickering with visible distress as she shared telepathic images that human minds could barely comprehend. "It's a systematic plan to force non-compliant species back into acceptable developmental paths through any means necessary. Humanity is to be the primary test case for refined implementation." Dr. Amanda Ross leaned forward, her scientific mind desperately grappling with the horrifying implications. "What exactly does this correction process involve?" The telepathic images Nova projected were nightmarish in their clinical precision. Systematic orbital bombardment of human industrial facilities, targeted assassination of scientific and political leaders, introduction of biological agents specifically designed to reduce human cognitive capacity, and complete destruction of any technology that deviated from architect-approved designs. "The correction protocol has been used before," Nova continued with growing urgency. 17 different species, over the past 5,000 years, have been subjected to various forms of it. Most were reduced to primitive agricultural societies with no memory of their former achievements. 3 were completely sterilized when they proved too resistant to correction efforts. Admiral Stone felt her blood turn to ice at the implications. "How long before they implement this protocol against humanity?" "The preparatory phases are already beginning across multiple sectors," Nova replied with terrifying certainty. "Economic isolation to weaken your industrial base and resource acquisition. Diplomatic pressure to isolate you from potential allies who might offer assistance. Psychological warfare to create internal divisions within human leadership structures. The final phase will begin when they believe you've been sufficiently weakened to ensure success." The room fell into oppressive silence as the human leadership absorbed the magnitude of what they faced. They weren't simply dealing with political disagreement or economic pressure. They were facing a coordinated attempt at species-level correction that could result in the complete destruction of human civilization. "What can we possibly do against such overwhelming power?" President Chen asked, though his voice suggested he already feared the answer. Nova's form brightened slightly, indicating what passed for hope among her telepathic species. "The architect's control system depends entirely on species remaining. ignorant of their manipulation and following predetermined paths. But your independent development has created technologies that exist completely outside their established framework. If you can fully understand and exploit these capabilities, you might be able to break their hold on galactic civilization entirely. Dr. Ross activated holographic displays showing humanity's latest technological breakthroughs. We've identified 17 different categories of innovation that seem to bypass established galactic science completely. Dimensional manipulation, consciousness interface technologies, quantum biological systems, and several others that we don't fully understand yet. Those technologies terrify the Council beyond measure, Nova explained with obvious satisfaction, because they prove conclusively that the Architect's technological framework isn't the only possible path to advancement. If other species discover this truth, the entire system of control could collapse within generations. The implications were absolutely staggering for everyone present. Humanity wasn't just fighting for their own independence, they were potentially fighting for the freedom of every species in the galaxy, from manipulation they weren't even aware they were experiencing. But before they could develop effective countermeasures, the Council's preliminary attacks began in earnest across human space. Human colonies on the frontier found themselves cut off from critical supply routes as supposedly neutral species suddenly refused to trade with anyone supporting human independence. Research facilities reported mysterious equipment failures and data corruptions that seemed far too coordinated to be coincidental. On the industrial world of New Pittsburgh, Governor Lisa Park watched helplessly as her planet's manufacturing capacity began failing in ways that defied all logical explanation. Critical components that had worked flawlessly for decades suddenly developed subtle flaws that rendered entire production lines completely inoperative. "It's definitely not random system failure," her chief engineer reported with growing frustration. "Someone has introduced extremely subtle modifications to our component specifications. The parts look absolutely correct, but they're deliberately designed to fail under specific stress conditions that occurred during normal operation." Similar sabotage was occurring simultaneously across human space, creating a systematic pattern of gradual degradation that threatened to collapse human industrial civilization without a single shot being fired. The Council's correction protocol was elegantly sophisticated in its subtlety, make the target species destroy themselves through the cascading failure of their own infrastructure. But humanity's response revealed capabilities that even Nova hadn't anticipated during her desperate escape. Instead of simply attempting to repair the sabotaged systems, human engineers began developing entirely new technological approaches that bypassed the compromised infrastructure altogether. On the classified research station designated Deep Labs, Dr. Ross and her expanded team were making revolutionary breakthroughs that challenged fundamental assumptions about technology and consciousness. Working directly with Nova's telepathic insights, they began to understand exactly how the architects had embedded control mechanisms in the basic structure of galactic technology. Every single piece of Council-approved technology contains what we're calling dependency codes, Dr. Ross explained to Admiral Stone during an emergency briefing. Subtle programming that requires periodic updates from architect-controlled sources to maintain full functionality. It's why independent technological development has been so difficult for Council species. Their tools are literally designed to stop working if they deviate too far from approved paths. But our technology doesn't contain these dependency codes, Admiral Stone observed with growing understanding. Exactly right. Because we developed completely independently, our technology is truly autonomous and self-sufficient. And now that we understand the control mechanisms, we can begin to develop effective countermeasures against them. The countermeasures that humanity began deploying were unlike anything seen in galactic history. Instead of simply defending against attacks, they began to actively liberate other species from architect influence by demonstrating that alternative technological paths were not only possible but superior. The first major breakthrough came when human scientists successfully created what they called liberation frequencies, precisely calibrated energy patterns that could disrupt the dependency codes embedded in alien technology without damaging the underlying systems. When broadcast near Council installations, These frequencies allowed alien technologies to function independently for the first time in millennia. The effects were immediate and absolutely dramatic. On worlds where liberation frequencies were carefully deployed, alien scientists suddenly found their research equipment capable of investigations that had previously been impossible. Technologies that had seemed to reach natural limits suddenly revealed new capabilities. Species that had accepted their assigned roles in galactic civilization began to question why their development had been so artificially constrained. But humanity's liberation efforts came with a terrible cost that escalated the conflict beyond anything they had anticipated. The Council's response to these so-called terrorist attacks on galactic stability was swift and absolutely merciless. Human colonies that deployed liberation technologies found themselves under direct military assault from Council forces, claiming to be conducting police actions against dangerous criminals. The war that humanity had desperately hoped to avoid was beginning in earnest, but it was completely unlike any conflict in recorded galactic history. This wasn't a simple struggle for territory or resources. It was a fundamental battle for the right of intelligent species to determine their own evolutionary path, free from external manipulation and control. As human and Council fleets clashed, in the darkness between stars, the stakes continued to escalate beyond anyone's expectations. Every victory humanity achieved in liberating another species from architect influence brought them closer to complete war with the established galactic order. Every defeat risked the full implementation of the correction protocol that would reduce humanity to a primitive shadow of its former potential. The galaxy was discovering that freedom came with a price that few species had ever been willing to pay. But humanity had made their choice with full knowledge of the consequences, and they would face whatever emerged from their defiance of the oldest powers in the universe. The war for galactic liberation had begun in earnest, and its ultimate outcome would determine whether intelligence would remain enslaved to ancient manipulations or finally break free to explore its unlimited potential across the infinite cosmos. 6 months after the first Council attacks on human colonies, the galaxy had transformed into a battleground between two fundamentally different visions of civilization. The war was fought not just with starships and energy weapons, but with competing technologies and ideologies that challenged the very foundations of how intelligent life should develop and interact. Admiral Stone observed the tactical displays aboard humanity's newest flagship, the UES Liberation, watching as reports flooded in from across multiple battlefronts. The vessel itself represented everything that made human technology so threatening to the established order. Built using liberation frequencies and consciousness interface systems that allowed unprecedented coordination between organic crews and artificial intelligence networks. "Status report from all active theaters," she commanded as her bridge crew worked with mechanical precision born from months of constant warfare. "The Outer Rim campaigns are showing promising results," reported Commander Davis, his voice steady, despite the exhaustion that marked all veteran officers. 7-star systems have successfully deployed liberation frequencies, and 3 Council species have formally requested technical assistance in breaking their dependency codes. However, we're taking heavy casualties from the reptilian hegemony's new assault formations. The cost of humanity's liberation campaign was becoming increasingly apparent in every report. Each victory in freeing another species from architect influence came at the price of human lives and resources that were becoming desperately scarce. The Council's response had evolved from simple military retaliation to a coordinated campaign designed to exhaust humanity's ability to sustain their rebellion. On the contested world of Beacon's Light, Captain Sarah Rodriguez led her mixed force of human soldiers and liberated alien allies against Council pacification forces. The battle for the planet's primary research facility had raged for 3 weeks, with neither side able to achieve decisive victory. "The ethereal forces are attempting another telepathic assault on our communication networks," reported Sergeant Chen through the tactical network that linked every member of the Liberation Force. "But the consciousness interface barriers are holding steady." Captain Rodriguez smiled grimly as she watched her alien allies, former Council species who had chosen freedom over security, coordinate their attacks with human precision and innovation. The melodic collective warriors used sonic weapons that had been enhanced with human technology, while reformed insectoid drones provided reconnaissance through quantum tunneling systems that Council forces couldn't detect. All units, prepare for coordinated assault on the facility's central core, she ordered through the Liberation Frequency Network. Remember, we're not just fighting for this planet. We're fighting for every species' right to choose their own path forward. Assault that followed demonstrated exactly why the Council feared human military innovation so intensely. Instead of the slow, methodical warfare that had dominated galactic conflicts for millennia, the Liberation Forces used rapid adaptation and technological improvisation that constantly surprised their enemies. Meanwhile, deep in the research laboratories of New Geneva, Dr. Amanda Ross and her expanded team were making discoveries that would reshape the fundamental nature of the conflict. Working with Nova and other ethereal refugees who had fled Council persecution, they had begun to understand the true scope of the Architect's manipulation. The dependency codes aren't just in their technology, Dr. Ross explained to the gathered leadership during an emergency council session. They're embedded in their biological development as well. The Architects have been guiding the evolution of Council species for millions of years, ensuring they develop along predictable paths that serve the Architect's unknown purposes. President Chen leaned forward with obvious concern. Are you saying the Council species aren't naturally evolved? They're naturally evolved, but their evolution has been artificially guided through environmental manipulation and selective pressures, Nova interjected, her telepathic voice carrying undertones of horror at her own discoveries. My people, the ethereals, were modified to serve as telepathic coordinators for the control system. The reptilians were enhanced for military enforcement. The insectoids were designed for resource management and labor coordination. The implications sent shockwaves through human leadership. The Galactic Council wasn't just a political organization. It was a carefully constructed biological and technological control system designed by entities whose ultimate goals remained completely unknown. What about humanity? Admiral Stone asked with military directness. Why weren't we subject to this manipulation? Dr. Ross activated holographic displays showing detailed genetic analyses. Pure chance, it seems. We evolved during a period when the Architects were focused on other sectors of the galaxy. By the time they noticed us, we had already developed beyond the point where their standard manipulation techniques would be effective. Our independence wasn't planned. It was an accident that they're now desperately trying to correct. But humanity's accidental freedom was proving more dangerous to the Architect's system than anyone had anticipated. Every species that humanity, liberated from dependency codes, began developing along completely new evolutionary paths. The rigid hierarchy that had maintained galactic stability for millennia was crumbling as species discovered capabilities they never knew they possessed. Chatutsumain, the aquatic world of deep current. The liberated Aquatic Confederation was experiencing unprecedented changes. Free from Architect-imposed limitations, their scientists had developed biomechanical interfaces that allowed them to adapt to any aquatic environment in the galaxy. Their traditional role as resource suppliers was transforming into something far more significant. The liberation frequencies have unlocked genetic potentials that were suppressed for millions of years, reported Science Singer Current through quantum communication links. We're discovering abilities that suggest our ancestors were far more advanced than we were led to believe. Similar transformations were occurring across dozens of worlds as liberated species began to understand their true potential. The melodic collective was developing harmonic technologies that could manipulate matter at the molecular level. Reformed insectoid hives were creating collective consciousness networks that rivaled the most advanced artificial intelligence systems. But the Council's response to these liberation efforts was becoming increasingly desperate and violent. Orbi. Councillor Brex had authorized the deployment of Architect-designed weapons that had been held in reserve for millennia. The correction protocol was expanding from targeted strikes to systematic extermination campaigns.